Good morning. My name is Rebecca Harmon, and I'm one of the practitioners here at CSL Greater Pittsburgh. Today, I'm going to speak to you about some spiritual principles, and my talk is titled Caesar's Palace. This title refers to a saying that Neville Goddard used often when he taught during the early to mid 20th century. Of course, Neville was a beloved mystic and spiritual teacher, and although he's been gone since 1972, he's still wildly popular today, and his talks live on through the wonders of YouTube. Neville spoke often about this physical world as the world of Caesar, referring to a passage from the book of Matthew in the Christian Bible, where Jesus says to the Pharisees that we should render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and render unto God that which is God's. The metaphysical interpretation of this is that while we are certainly spiritual beings having this human experience, we are having that human experience in this physical world, not in a supernatural world. And so the miracles and the demonstrations and the good that comes to us is going to come to us through these physical surroundings that we live in. And they're going to have to abide by the laws of physics that govern life on this planet. To highlight the meaning of this concept of the world of Caesar, I'm going to share a fable that's well known and well worn. I've edited it just slightly for the modern context. And it's the story of a man who lives in a town that is about to be flooded. There's a storm coming, and he's a deeply spiritual man. He's very devoted, and he believes that God always provides what he needs and will save him no matter what comes his way. And so the weather people have predicted this monster storm, and they are evacuating people. And the officials come door to door in his neighborhood. They get to his door and they say, hello, there's a storm coming. We're recommending that people evacuate to a safe place until the storm passes. And he says, get out of here. God's going to take care of me. I don't need to evacuate. So they go on down the road and try to convince other residents to get out of the way of the storm. The man goes to bed that night, and in the morning when he wakes up, the storm has arrived and the water is already rising. He knows and believes deeply that God is going to save him, but he decides he might need to get on the roof. So he goes upstairs, out of the attic window, and onto the roof. Not soon after lunch, not too long after lunch, a rescue boat shows up, and they see him on the roof, and they tie a rope around a life preserver. They throw it to him, and they say, grab it and jump in the water. We'll pull you to safety. He kicks the life preserver back and says, I'm not getting in your boat. God is going to save me. And they kind of look at each other and they say, okay. And they go on down the pike to get other people who need rescued from their roofs as well. The day progresses and it's almost nighttime, and a helicopter comes to the man. He can feel the water lapping at his feet as he sits on his roof, and a rescue chopper comes in, and they're hovering close to his rooftop there, and they lower a flexible ladder, and over the PA comes instructions. We're going to lower a vest on a cable. We need you to put the vest on. We need you to latch it and grab onto the flexible ladder. He gets angry. He starts waving them away. Get out of here. Get out of here. I don't need your help. God is going to save me. And as any good chopper pilot knows, you don't try to wrangle somebody onto a hovering chopper who's combative. So they pull back up the flexible ladder, and they go on to the next set of folks that need to be rescued. The night grows dark, the floodwaters continue to rise, and the man perishes in the flood. He arrives, of course, at the pearly gates where St. Peter stands to greet him. And remember, this is a fable, right? And the man is angry. He said, I prayed for God to save me, and God let me down. St. Peter says, guy, dude, we sent you an evacuation bus, a rescue boat, and a helicopter. This relates, I believe, to my talk focused on this concept of living in Caesar's palace or Caesar's world, because the man in this story failed to understand that his good, his answered prayer, was going to come to him through this world that he lives in, through very ordinary means, through an evacuation idea, or through a rescue boat or a rescue helicopter. This concept is missed too often. And the point that I believe Neville was making as he often spoke about this biblical passage is that there are different constructs in the spiritual world than exist in this physical world that we live in. And we need to understand those if we are to fully receive the good that is ours. Two of Neville's most popular stories highlight this point. His first was the story of being honorably discharged from the United States Army during World War II. And the second was a story about how he and his family, a few years later, were able to get passage back to the US from Barbados on a boat when all of the reservations were booked up for several months ahead. And you can find those in his talks, which are widely available on YouTube. I have written many blogs about manifesting things in my life, things that I wanted, things that I've needed. And in sharing my stories and my experiences, someone inevitably asks, well, if you can do all that, you can probably manifest the winning lottery ticket, right? In theory, yes, we can. And many people spend a lot of time trying. But in practice, I have found, and many others as well, that spiritual laws work best when we acknowledge that they work within the confines and the framework of the physical world that we live in. So what does that mean? It means that money absolutely shows up when we use the spiritual tools that we've learned from teachers like Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay, Deepak Chopra, Neville Goddard, and others. But the money and the financial support and the good that comes to us comes through physical, not paranormal or supernatural means. In my own experience, the needs that I've had have never once been met by a disembodied hand coming out of the clouds with a fistful of money in it. Never once has the prize patrol knocked on my door with a giant cardboard check, and never once has a benefactor come out of seemingly nowhere wanting to write me a check to solve all my problems. But the good that I have sought and needed and desired has come to me by the shifting and the movement of circumstances, people, and events all around me. In other words, it has come to me in very ordinary ways. I have shared multiple stories on how this works, and two of my favorites, of course, are still about the new roof that I was able to get, and how a storm and a tree and a part-time job came my way. And also the story of how my student loans are now being paid, where I did my spiritual work to find relief from the large monthly payment that I was making each month toward these student loans. That demonstration, the student loans, came to me in the way of information that was shared with me in a totally unrelated conversation about a student loan repayment program that was available. The money that I manifested in those two scenarios totals almost $50,000. But before I was able to receive any of that, I had to be willing to accept it through the framework of this world that I live in, the world of Caesar, the physical world. I had two additional recent examples of spiritual work that I was doing on eliminating some debt that I had incurred, non-student loan, non-house debt, but just some debt that we all tend to run up every once in a while. And the answer to that work that I did came through emails about consulting and teaching opportunities. So again, the answer to my spiritual work, the answer to my prayers, came through very regular and ordinary means. If in any of these circumstances I had insisted on receiving the money from a leprechaun, a disembodied hand with a fistful of cash, the prize patrol, or some rich benefactor writing me a check, I'd still be paying more than $500 a month toward my student loans out of my budget, and I might have a leaky roof. Two of the most important skills that we can add to our toolbox, if you will, in realizing our good, in demonstrating our good in this world of Caesar, are openness and willingness. We have to stay open to seeing the opportunities that are all around us and that come to us. And if we're fixated on some rich person writing us a check, if we're fixated on the prize patrol knocking on the front door, we're going to miss all of these other opportunities that are all around us, ready to come into our experience and address our needs. After we understand that we need to be open, we also then need to be willing. to act. I'd still be paying off part of the roof that the insurance company didn't cover if I had been unwilling to say yes when a temporary part-time job came to me right at the time that I needed to pay for that roof. Same concept with the 2 opportunities that came to me recently around debt relief and debt payments. I was invited to do some additional work and I said yes. I was willing to act when these opportunities came to me and presented me an opportunity to bring the good into my life that I was seeking. This openness and willingness enables us to see the signs and hear the whispers of spirit. In all my years of being the beneficiary of miraculous things, I have never once seen a flashing neon sign put in my front yard to tell me what needs to be done or where my good is hiding. It's never a billboard that shows up on my route to work. My experience has been over and over that the messages, the guidance, it comes in someone's passing comment. It comes in a request from someone, a gut feeling to go somewhere, or even sometimes, as I experienced recently, in an email. In order to manifest our good, we have to be willing to follow Spirit's supernatural nudges, but also take some very common and ordinary steps in this physical world, in Caesar's world. Everyone listening to me today can use the tools and the techniques that have been taught for centuries by gurus and priests, rishis and prophets. But we must understand that we have to apply those tools and work within the limits of the laws of physics that exist right here on this plane. As a teacher, I like to show, not tell. So I'm going to share a brief YouTube video with you that shows one particular law of physics and how it impacts very average, ordinary things in our lives. So I'm going to share my screen here. And we'll watch this and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Today, to test out my new slow motion camera I got, I'm going to be dropping a feather and a chunk of metal and see if they hit the ground at the same time under a vacuum. So the key to this experiment is dropping them at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the feather to the top of the vacuum chamber with a magnet. So this experiment proves that gravity pulls on everything with the same acceleration. And the reason is because the force that gravity pulls down on you is proportional to the amount of mass in the object. So the more mass an object has, the harder gravity pulls on it, but the more mass it has, the harder it is to move. So what that amounts to is everything is pulled down at the same acceleration due to gravity. But what makes it a little bit messy is that in air, there's also air resistance when things fall, and so you can't really see how everything falls at the same rate. But if you remove that air, then you should be able to see that effect. Okay, first we'll do in-air test. So this is dropping a feather in air. Okay, we're under full vacuum now, so let's do our test under vacuum and see if it looks any different. Okay, I want to do it in normal speed so you can appreciate how fast the feather actually falls. So here's feather in a vacuum, normal speed. 3, 2, 1. Looks like it almost gets pushed down. It's weird to see it fall.
I love that experiment. I never get tired of seeing it. And I like to use this example because we see very clearly the example of the physical world where we're impacted by the laws of physics, and that would be the air resistance that the feather experiences, compared to the unrealistic place of living in a vacuum. We can't live in a vacuum, so we can't exist in that vacuum where the feather and the metal object fall at the same rate. We live in the example of the air. So we find that we are impacted by things in the physical world, by the laws of physics. God absolutely works in mysterious ways, but those ways travel to us on this physical plane and must interact with us and abide by the scientific laws, the laws of physics that we are all living immersed in. Some people may say that I'm closing the door on miracles, but I look at that differently. I disagree. I believe that the more we stay open to everyday miracles, the more miracles will come our way. I also know that waiting on lottery winnings, disembodied hands, and rich benefactors are long shots. But the demonstration of good that comes through the people, the places, the circumstances of everyday life, those can be, if we're open to it, regular occurrences in life. I'm certainly open to once-in-a-lifetime miraculous demonstrations, and often I think we've seen these occur around health and healing and restoration of people to wholeness and wellness. But I also know that I don't need to sit and wait for once-in-a-lifetime miracles to come my way. The miracles come to me. Demonstrations of good come to me and all of us through very ordinary means on a regular basis. And I am grateful each time I see some small good come my way, each time I see some small miracle unfold in front of me. I have, more than I wish, seen and heard people who are sitting and waiting for some good to come into their lives. They want an expansion in some area. They want their businesses to turn around. They're praying for answers. They're seeking expansion. They're doing visioning and affirmations. They're seeking and holding on to something, and they're holding on to a very narrow vision of how that needs to come into their life. And when they hold on to that so tightly, they're closing themselves off to seeing all of the ways that their good is showing up and waiting for them to recognize it and to welcome it, to be open and receive it. Kind of like the man on the roof who prayed for a rescue and was unable to see the evacuation bus, the rescue boat, and the helicopter as answers to his prayer. The point in all of this is that we can sit and wait on $1 million, and we can feel the disappointment and the misery as it continues to elude us. Or we can learn how to give thanks 1,000,000 times over for the good that shows up in our life. Those crinkled, unassuming dollars that cross our paths. At the end of the day, $1 million is $1 million, and I'm speaking, of course, metaphorically. The money, or the good, will end up being the same, perhaps even more when we take it in on a step-by-step basis. But in the meantime, as we learn to look around and accept the miracles that come in everyday, ordinary means, our lives will be much richer, and we will live a much more miracle-filled life. We can take the step forward into this by living in faith, taking it a step at a time and understanding that we live in Caesar's world. And when we learn in Caesar's world to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, when we learn to accept that we live within the physical constructs of this world, we will not only avoid the disappointment of trying to manifest lottery jackpots and more, but we can enjoy the many, many wonderful demonstrations of good that come into our way every day. And so it is.